Okay, hi, I'm Cleo, and this is a video tutorial for the girlfriend socks. I loved making this sock. It's very beginner friendly, and my very first knitting project was socks. And I think it's a project everybody should try out at some point. So it's designed for people that have never knit socks before that know how to knit, but I also think people who have never knit before could make these socks. This pattern is on Ravelry and Etsy. I highly recommend checking out my page to purchase the pattern. I would really appreciate the support, and this video will only walk through size small. So check out that pattern for all the specific details on the techniques and the stitch count and how to block it and finish it. So please check out that pattern. It's very beginner friendly, and this is an accompanying tutorial for the written pattern. I've named this pattern the girlfriend sock because I've made a lot of socks for myself over the past year, and my girlfriend wanted her own sock, so I designed this pattern and made her a pair, and she loves them, so I made a pattern for this sock. The girlfriend sock is knit top down with a rolled hem, a 2x2 rib, 2 contrasting stripes. There's a slip stitch heel flap, heel turn, and decrease in gusset, and then there's a contrast toe. There's 3 sizes available. This is a size small, it fits women's small. This is a size medium, it fits women's large, men's small, and there's a 3rd size for men's large. All of the sizes are the circumference of the foot, so the width of the foot. There are 2 height lengths. This is the short version and this is the long version. And the difference is that the ribbing is a little bit shorter on the short sock, and this area here is a bit shorter, and then this is longer. The foot length is adjustable. So in the pattern, you'll figure out when you'll start for the contrast toe. This pattern uses fingering weight sock yarn, and today I'll be knitting the 2nd sock for my own pair of socks using Uni Merino sock yarn. It's 75% superwash and 25% nylon. I highly recommend picking out a sock yarn that has nylon in it to provide some durability and strength. There are several different techniques to knit socks, but my favorite technique is using a 9-inch circular needle and a 32-inch circular needle. You're welcome to use your own needle types, but this video will use a 9-inch and a 32-inch that uses the magic loop method. Both the needles are in a size 1, US 1, or 2.25 millimeters, and I'm using the ChowGoo brand. You'll need a pair of scissors and 4 stitch markers. I'll be using 3 red and 1 silver, just to differentiate 2 different parts of the pattern. I love this pattern so much, and I really enjoy making them. I've loved all the test knitter results, and I really think this is a great pattern for beginners. That's all the info you need for this girlfriend sock pattern. If you have any questions or need help, feel free to message me on Instagram at stitchedbycleo or send me an email at stitchedbycleo@gmail.com. Good luck knitting your socks and happy knitting. All right, hello. So let's get started with casting on our sock. The first part of the sock is the rolled hem, so let's get started on casting on. I have my main color here and my secondary color. The secondary color is the stripes and the toe, and we'll mostly be working with the main color. And in the pattern, this will be titled as MC, and this is SC for main color, secondary color. So I'm gonna grab my white yarn here, and we're gonna do most of the pattern with our 9-inch needle. This is typically used for sock knitting, and it's in size 1 or 2.25 millimeters. So I have my needle and my yarn, and I also have scissors on the side. We are gonna do a long tail cast on, so we need to start with a pretty long tail on one side. I'm going to pinch this yarn with my fingers and pull the yarn all the way up to my shoulder, and that got me a pretty good length. I'm gonna do that one more time, all the way to my shoulder and back here. So I've got all this extra yarn here that we're going to use for the long tail cast on. Let's start with making a slip knot. I grab the yarn with my left hand and insert my fingers on this side. We are going to turn our work, grab the yarn, and pull through, and you can grab either yarn. One more time, pinching it with this hand, turn, grab some yarn and pull through. We are now going to attach our slip knot onto the needle. So I'm inserting it on the needle and pulling the yarn to tighten it. Overall, when we're casting on, we are going to maintain a looser tension. We want the loops to be uniform, but we don't want this cast on to be super tight because the first round is going to be tough to knit. Let's do the long tail cast on. I'm going to grab all the yarn in my fist, take the pointer finger and push it through, and the thumb and push it here. So we have a diamond shape. We're going to pull it down and we have this sort of V shape. We're going to go under the left, pull it over, under the right, and through this loop here and pull our strings. So that just created a stitch. This is our slip stitch. Here's the first stitch. Grab, pointer finger through, thumb through, pull it open, diamond, V, then go under the left, under the right, through the loop, and pull. And I'm going to cast on all the stitches I need for size small. I've casted on 56 stitches for my size small, and right here I have a beginning of round stitch marker. For my sock, I will always be using a silver stitch marker, and then I have my scissors here. I've casted on 56 stitches for my size, and now I'm actually going to cast on one more with the same long tail cast on technique. Now I'm going to go down here and identify which string is our extra long one, and I'm going to cut it, leaving about an 8 to 10 inch tail that we will weave in later. So we've got a short tail here and then our yarn that's still connected to our ball. We are going to identify our right side of the work. It should already be facing you, and you can see there's little loops turning upwards, and on the back it kind of looks like a purl stitch where there's loops around each stitch. So keep our right side facing. We're going to pull the yarn to the back and twist over here, connecting our needle tips. We're going to make sure the stitches are not twisted, and we're going to spread out the stitches so that we have some close to each end, and you might have to work a little bit, especially for the size small, to stretch those over. I'm connecting my ends again. I've stretched out the stitches and I'm ready to join in the round. I have the slip stitch here, the first stitch we casted on, and the 57th stitch we casted on the right. I'm going to slip this stitch from the left to the right needle, and it will get a bit loose, but that's okay. And this part's a bit tricky because everything is pretty tight, but I am going to insert from right to left purlwise into that slip stitch. I'm going to pull all of the yarn that's attached to this stitch here, and carefully we are going to pull this slip stitch over the needle. We've pulled it over, and now we've connected in the round. I'm going to slip that stitch back over to the right side, hold the needles, and pull this yarn to tighten up that stitch. Now we've created this little attachment so that we don't get a big gap in the center. I'm going to take my stitch marker here and insert it on the needle. We've finished our cast on, and now we are going to start with the rolled hem. For the rolled hem, we are doing plain knit stitches. I'm going to separate that tail here, and to knit, we insert from left to right to the back corner, pull the yarn around, back, left, right, and pull the stitch through and push the stitch off the needle. From left to right, back, left, right, pull the stitch through. Insert the needle from left to right, yarn in the back, to the left, to the right, and pull the stitch through. This first round is pretty tight, so just take your time to pull all the stitches all the way to the edge and knit all the way around. We are going to knit 2 rows, so knit around, slip the marker, knit around, and slip the marker. I finished the rolled hem and I'm going to get started on the 2x2 rib. We'll slip the marker over to the right side. We are going to knit 2 stitches and purl 2 stitches. This is also called a 2x2 rib. So let's knit these first 2 stitches in from the left to the right and pull the yarn around. From the left to the right, pull the yarn around. And then to switch from a knit stitch to the purl stitch, we need to get the yarn in the front because when you knit, it's kind of automatically going in the back. So we're going to pull the yarn through so it's pulling out the front and insert our needle from the right to the left, but then in front. We are going to the back, to the left, around, and pull the stitch through, and the yarn is still on the front. Inserting from the right to the left in front and pull the yarn around. And now we're doing those 2 knit stitches and the yarn needs to be in the back. So we pull it around the needle and knit 2 stitches. Then pull the yarn to the front and purl 2 stitches. We are going to continue this all the way around. For the short leg, I'll be doing 7 rows of knit 2, purl 2 for a total of 10 rows starting at the long tail cast on. For the short leg, you'll do 9 rows of knit 2, purl 2. So now knit 2 plain rounds and stop at the stitch marker before we start the stripes. I've knit 2 plain rows of stockinette, slipped the marker, and now we will begin the stripes of our sock. I have my secondary color here, and I'm going to unwind a bit of this yarn. I'm going to leave, again, about an 8-inch tail, create a loop with my fingers. I'm going to insert into this first stitch and pull the loop over. Now we are going to knit 1 full row with this red. This white yarn is going to hang in the back. We'll be grabbing that again in the future. I've knit 1 stitch. I'm going to drop the tail and knit all the way across. Now I'm going to knit 1 round and stop at the stitch marker before we join the rounds to limit the jog. For the second round, we are going to do a lifted stitch join. This is the first stitch with our new color, and the row below is our previous color, the main color. Stitches have legs, so there's a left leg and a right leg with the V they create. I'm going to go from the back to the front through this white stitch, and I'm going to pull it up and set it on the needle. I'm going to pull everything back here a bit, and now we are going to knit 2 together. So going from the left to the back for both stitches with my red yarn, I'm going to knit them together, and now I'm going to turn and kind of pull all of these stitches. And now we are going to knit a full round with a total of 4 rounds of red. Now I've knit my rounds of red, and we have 3 rows here of red, but then 1 red row of stitches on the needles that will count in this stripe. We're now switching to our main color. I'm inserting my needle into the first stitch. I'm going to turn my work and set the red yarn aside. I'm pulling the white yarn from this lower row up, and I'm going to knit with this new yarn. I'm going to check back here though that it's not tugging too much. So I want a loose loop right there, and I'm going to knit all the way around with my new color. And you'll see here that once we start knitting with our white, we now have 4 rows of red. After one round of knitting with my new color, I'm going to do that lifted stitch join one more time. So here is our white yarn. I'm looking down. I'm going to pick up the right leg of the row below, pull it onto the needle, and knit these 2 stitches together. And now I'm going to follow the rest of the pattern to create 2 contrasting stripes until we are ready to knit the rest of the leg in our main color. All right, let's do a check-in because I've made a good amount of progress. I finished the stripes and did the leg. So far we've done the rolled hem, the 2x2 ribbing, 2 contrasting stripes, and then for the short leg, you knit 22 rounds of your main color. And now we are going to begin the slip stitch heel flap using our 32-inch needle in the same size. I'm going to set the beginning of round stitch marker aside, and we are going to be knitting on 1/2 of the sock. So for size small, that's 28 stitches. The 9-inch needle is going to hold on to the back 28 stitches of the sock. For the slip stitch heel flap, we are following a specific pattern to create a durable and thick heel flap. Let's grab our 32-inch needle here, and the sequence will be slip 1 purlwise. So I'm going to insert the needle from the right to the left and slip, and then I'm going to knit 1. And for this first stitch, because I'm pulling the yarn from the other needle, I'm going to try to keep it on the tighter end. So I'm knitting this stitch and then repeating slip 1, and then before I do this knit, I'm going to tighten everything up and knit 1. And this 9-inch needle might be a little bit in the way, but we're going to continue to slip 1, knit 1 across 28 stitches for 1/2 of our sock. Okay, I've slipped 1, knit 1 all the way across 28 stitches, and you'll see in the back the 9-inch needle is holding on to the other stitches. I am going to turn my work. This is the right side where you can see the knit stitches, and we're going to turn our work around where we will start to see purl stitches. Yarn is coming in the front, and I am going to pull around the 32-inch needle to start knitting the other way. So for the back side, the sequence is slip 1 purlwise, just that first stitch, and then purl across the rest of the row. So I've slipped, and then I will purl all the way across to the other side before we turn our work and continue to repeat the sequence on the right side and wrong side. I've purled to the end of my row, and again I'm going to turn my work and pull the needle around to start the next side. So knitting on the right, purling on the wrong, and we are going to repeat rows 1 and 2 a total of 13 times. So you'll see that in total there will be 26 rows, and once I've knit a bit, I'll show you how to count those rows. All right, I have knit 26 rows, and you can count it by looking at the slip stitches pulled up in the front. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And now we are going to begin our heel turn. I'm on the right side of my work. I just finished the purling side. I'm gonna grab my needle and knit 14. I'm slipping the first stitch with yarn in the back and then knitting 14 stitches. I've knit 14 stitches, and now I am going to make a decrease called a slip slip knit. I'm going to be working with these first 2 stitches here. I'm going to slip knitwise, so as if to knit, insert, as if to knit, insert, and then with my left needle inserting between those 2 stitches and out the front, and then I will knit those together. So now I've made a little decrease there. I will knit an additional stitch and turn my work. We will not be working these stitches. We'll be knitting from the middle out. So turning my work, yarn is now in the front. I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise, yarn in the front, and purl 3 stitches. There's 3 there. And then I'm going to purl 2 together. So going through the first stitch purlwise, going through the second, and pulling the yarn over to purl like normal. Then I'm going to purl 1 additional stitch and turn my work. Now we are going to repeat a sequence, going back and forth until all of the stitches have been worked. When we are on the right side, the knit side, we are going to slip 1 purlwise where the yarn is in the back, and then I am going to knit until we reach the gap. And I'll show you what that looks like. So because of the decrease we made, there's sort of an obvious gap between our stitches. So I am going to knit across until I get to 1 stitch before the gap. So I'm only knitting a few stitches for this first round. But now we are going to connect these 2 stitches to limit the hole right here and eventually turn our work. So again, we're doing a slip, slip, knit. So I will slip this first stitch knitwise, slip the second stitchwise on the other side of the gap, and knit 2 together. Then I will knit 1 additional stitch and turn my work. Yarn's getting a bit tangled, so I'll fix that. On the purl side, we'll do something similar. So we're going to purl the first stitch and then purl until we reach the gap. And now we see this obvious gap here, and to close the gap, we are going to be purling 2 stitches together, purl 1 additional stitch, and turn our work. So we are going to repeat this sequence all the way until all of the stitches have been worked. I've now knit all of the stitches, and now there are 16 stitches left on my 32-inch needle. Now we are going to begin the gusset of the sock, where we will knit and pick up stitches along the side, knit across our previous stitches, pick up on the opposite side, and go back to the center. So we are going to gather our stitch markers again. I have my silver beginning of round stitch marker and 3 other stitch markers with different colors to identify where our decreases will be. So for my size, I'm going to start with knitting 8 stitches. I've knit across 8 stitches, and I'm going to place my beginning of round stitch marker and knit across the next 8 stitches. And now we are going to pick up the gusset stitches, which are along the side of the slip stitch heel flap. For my size, I'll be picking up 13 stitches, and you kind of have to guess where you're picking them up, but I'll show you as best as I can where you're going to pick them up. I like to start from the bottom, and if you see on the inside, you kind of have to unroll the heel flap to identify that these are the stitches we're going to pick up. So we'll look at the bottom here, and it looks like this is about the first stitch on the bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right, so this is the first stitch we're going to pick up. So I'm going to insert my needle underneath both legs of the stitch, and to pick up a stitch, wrap the needle like usual and be careful to pick it up. So we just added on a stitch. Turning, looking in the back again, and this is the next stitch I'll pick up. So again, grab, pick up, wrap the yarn, and pull through. And take your time with this step and pick up 13 stitches. All right, I think I have 13 there, but let's double check. So again, we knit 8 stitches here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now this is where we begin counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right, so I'm at 13. We are now going to pick up ladder stitches in between the front and the back of the sock. Ladder stitches can be found in between 2 stitches. So there's sort of a ladder here and steps to look down that we are going to pick up. So I am going to pick up 2 different stitches here. First, I'm going to pick up the first ladder. The left needle will go from the front to the back, and I am going to knit through the back loop. So this one looks a bit different. Here's the front side of the stitch and the back side. I'm going to turn my work over and inserting my needle in here, and it's a bit tricky. Yeah, you kind of have to keep it loose. And I've inserted through the back loop of the ladder and then knitting like normal. And we will be picking up 2 ladder stitches. So that is from the first ladder, and now we have the second. I'm picking it up, placing it on my needle. It needs to be this way. Picking it up from the front to the back. This is the front, this is the back. I'm knitting through the back loop and pulling off. So now we have 15 stitches alongside of the gusset. I'm going to grab a red stitch marker and place it here. Now we will knit across all the stitches on the 9-inch needle like normal. You'll notice that after knitting several stitches, the work begins to get tight because the 32-inch needle is pretty long. So using the magic loop method, I am going to pull the needle out until we see the cable again right around the decreases. I'm going to bend the cable, kind of split up the stitches, and pull the cable through to loosen the work. I'm going to pull this extra cable through to create some sort of loop, and it kind of loosens the tension here. So we can knit across the rest of the stitches here. I'll push the needle back in and we have the extra cable here, but we didn't make a big gap here. So again, knitting across the front of the sock until we reach the other side. I'm at the other end of my 9-inch needle, and I'll just knit the last stitches until I'm done with the 9-inch needle. We are going to set this aside for the rest of the row, but hold on to it because we will use it soon. Now we are on the other part of the gusset, and we are going to do the opposite work on this side. So starting with our stitch marker to note where to decrease, I'm going to insert it there. I'm identifying the ladder stitches. I'm going to pick up the second ladder and then the first ladder and knit them through the back loop. I'm just going to take the extra needle back here from the 32-inch cable to pick up the ladder stitch from the front to the back, and then carefully knitting through the back loop, and sort of tangled, but if you go slowly you should be okay. I've knit through the back loop, and now I'm going to grab the top ladder here from the front to the back and go to the back side and knit like normal. and pull through. So now we've knit 2 ladder stitches. And again, picking up 13 stitches on the side. Unroll it a little bit and identify the very back stitches. And we can count from the bottom to see where we're going to pick it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so we're starting with this bottom stitch right here. Again, a little tight with our tension, but we'll fix that soon. So I'm inserting under both legs of this stitch on the side of the heel flap, wrapping my yarn around and picking up a stitch. So I'm going to follow that all the way up the side of the slip stitch heel flap. I've knit several of the pickup stitches and it's getting pretty tight again, so let's loosen up our work. I'm going to create a bigger cable loop there, pull out our work, identify where the stitch marker is, bend the cable, and pull out some of the cable to loosen our work, making sure that we still have a loop on both sides and that no stitches fell off the needle. It's looking pretty weird right now, but we're gonna fix it soon by going back to our 9-inch needle. So now let's see if we've picked up enough. We need 13 on the side, but again, these 2 ladder stitches don't count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I have 2 more to do. Okay, 13. That's all picked up. And now we are going to continue knitting in the round. We are done knitting on one side. We're going to knit the rest of the foot while continuing to decrease the gusset. I am going to knit across until I'm close to the stitch marker, and then we will transition to our 9-inch needle. All right, I'm 1 stitch away from the stitch marker, and I am going to stop here and grab my 9-inch needle again. And now we are going to transition all of the work on our 32-inch needle to the 9-inch needle. So let's knit this first stitch and then slip the marker. And again, because we're changing needles, we'll want this first stitch to be pretty tight. Slip the marker. I like to insert into the next stitch to stabilize everything and then pull the yarn. Knit a few stitches and it'll start to feel a little bit more comfortable. I'm getting close here to where the rest of the cable is sitting. I'm knitting these last 2 ladder stitches, and you'll see that still on the needle is the decrease stitch marker. I'm grabbing that, transferring it over, and then I'm going to pull the extra cable all the way down to the 9-inch so that we can continue to knit across the back. Still kind of tight as we transition, but we'll continue to knit across the front of the sock until we get to the other side, and then we will repeat by slipping the marker and knitting all the way back to the beginning of round. Knitting this last stitch, letting go of that 32-inch needle, and I have the stitch marker here, which I'm taking off and placing on the 9-inch needle. And now, let me see here. We are going to pull the needle to the edge of our work to knit across the rest of the work. Something to pay attention to is that the stitches on the 9-inch needle stay on the needle. We don't want them falling off. Optionally, you can use a stitch stopper, needle stopper, and insert it on the edge of the needle to make sure none of the stitches fall off. So we'll continue knitting here until on the next round we start decreasing at the turning points. Now we are finished with our 32-inch needle, and we are going to set this aside, and the next time we will use it will be for the contrasting toe to decrease the stitches to the end of the toe. So I'm going to take this needle stopper out and knit back to the beginning of round. And now this is a technique I like to do when I'm doing a decrease that happens every other round. So I'm going to grab that third stitch marker that matches the two decrease stitch markers here, and this one opens up. I'm going to slip it on the beginning of round stitch marker and close it. So when I get to the center and it was on a silver stitch marker, I will just rotate it over to the other side, and whenever I'm in the middle of my work, I can reference the beginning to know that this round is a decrease round. We will be decreasing at the 2 points where there are red stitch markers. So knit until you are 3 stitches before this first stitch marker on the left. When we get to this first stitch marker, I stop when there's 3 stitches left. When we are at our first decrease stitch marker from the beginning of the round, we are going to make a decrease. I am going to knit 2 together. So I am going to start on the left side of the 2 stitches, insert my needle into both stitches knitwise. So I've inserted my needle and I'm going to knit like normal. So we now made a decrease. I'm knitting this last stitch and slipping the marker. I'll give everything a little tug because right at this beginning point, there tends to be a little hole where we've connected everything. I'm knitting across until I get to the second decrease stitch marker. I've knit across and now I'm going to slip that decrease stitch marker. Now we are going to do a similar type of decrease. So I've knit the first stitch after the stitch marker, and now I'm going to slip, slip, knit, which we did during the heel turn. So I am going to slip the first stitch knitwise, slip the second stitch knitwise, put my left needle purlwise through both sides, and knit like normal. And so now we made a decrease on our other side. I'm gonna knit until I get to the beginning of round stitch marker. Now I've reached the beginning of round. I am going to switch to the other side of our stitch marker, noting that this is a plain knitting round. You can reference the pattern, but we are going to continue to decrease until we get to our original stitch count, which for my size is 56 stitches. We will do 1 round of plain knitting or plain stockinette, and then 1 round where we decrease at our side markers, where on the first side we knit 2 together, and on the second side we slip, slip, knit. So again, I'm going to knit 1 round and then decrease 1 round until we get to 56 stitches, which will add about 2 to 3 inches of our foot length. Okay, I've knit for a little bit, so let's review where we're at. We finished the leg, then we moved on to knitting half of the stitches. For my size, that's 28 stitches. Doing the slip stitch heel flap, heel turn, then we turned, picked up the gusset stitches, and started working in the round, where every other round we were doing a decrease on the left side and the right side. You'll be doing decreases every other round until you get to your original stitch count, which for my size is 56. And once you get to that point, you are plain knitting. I kept my stitch markers on to show you how we are going to transition our stitch markers to a different point in our work to change our beginning of round so that eventually when we do the sock toe, it'll be evened out. So you're continuing to do decreases. You count 1 half and the other half, and they both count as 28 stitches in a total of 56 stitches. And you're back at your beginning of round marker, which mine is silver with the red attached to it. And I am going to release the current beginning of round marker, and I'm going to knit to the first decrease point. Okay, I'm at this first decrease point on one side of the sock, and this is going to be our new beginning of round. So I'm placing a silver stitch marker there, whatever your beginning of round stitch marker is. and I'm going to continue knitting around, and eventually we'll be removing this other decrease stitch marker and continuing in the round until we're ready to begin the contrast toe. I'm at this second decrease stitch marker, and so I am going to remove it and set all of the stitch markers aside for the rest of the project. We just have this beginning of round stitch marker. And now we are knitting for a while for the arch of the foot for the sock. You'll just be going in the round doing plain knit or stockinette stitches until we do the toe. I've knit in the round for a while, and now I'm going to see if I'm ready to start the contrast toe. I am going to knit until I'm 1.5 inches away from the end of my foot. And that's for my size, which is 1.5 inches. I like to try on the sock and carefully hold on the needles so I don't lose any stitches, and I'll find that the work ends around the edge of my pinky toe. And if you are gifting these socks for someone else, I recommend looking at a size guide online to compare their shoe size to the length of their foot inches wise. Now we are on the last part of our sock, which is the contrasting toe. I have my other color here, scissors, and my 32-inch needle. I ended at the beginning of round, and we are done with that stitch marker for now. We are going to change colors and start using our 32-inch needle. I am inserting the 32-inch needle into the first stitch, and I am going to get my red yarn ready. Make about an 8-inch tail and start knitting across half of your stitches, which again for this size is 28 stitches. Knitting there with the long part of the yarn. And it'll get a little loose on this 9-inch side, but we'll leave it for now. And as we're switching to get our stitches off the 9-inch needle, you may have to pull on the opposite end. And then again, we're going 28 across, so I have a little bit more to knit. This is my 28th stitch. And now we are going to use the magic loop method where we have extra cables and we're mostly working flat with our longer needles. I'm going to pull this needle out, turn our work, and continue knitting on the other half of the stitches with the 32-inch needle. We have this cable loop here and the rest of the 32-inch needle over here. We still have the 9-inch needle on our left needle, and we're transitioning over to our 32-inch needle with our red or secondary color yarn. So I'm going to continue to knit all the way across this row with the red yarn, and when you're joining two sides together, knit a little bit tighter to ensure that there's not little gaps there. I'm now at the other end, and we are done with our 9-inch needle for the rest of the project. So we can set that aside, and we're also done with our main color yarn. So I'm going to cut about an 8-inch tail, and we'll be weaving in that end at the end of the project. So continuing with the magic loop method, I'm pulling out this cable here, pulling this needle out, and we are going to turn our work to begin on the opposite side. Pushing the left needle in, the yarn we're continuing to use is in the back here, attached. I'll pull and turn my needle over and we'll knit to the left. Now we're starting a decrease sequence where for one round we are decreasing on both sides, here and here, and then for one round doing plain knit stitches. But reference the pattern because there's a couple specific numbers here. For a decrease row, we are going to knit the first stitch and slip, slip, knit the next two stitches to form a decrease. There we go. And I'm pulling everything up here and trying to keep it tight. And then I'm knitting this slip, slip, knit. I am going to knit until I'm 3 stitches before the other end. and we'll repeat a knit 2 together stitch decrease. I'm on the other edge now with 3 stitches until the end, and I am going to knit 2 together. And on this first round it's a bit tight. Knit 2 together and knit the last stitch, and we are going to turn our work. So on the front side we knit 1, slip, slip, knit, decrease, knit across, knit 2, knit 1. Turning our work, pulling the needle into the stitches, and we are going to repeat this on this side as well. So knit 1, slip, slip, knit, knit across, knit 2 together, knit 1 until we are at the beginning. And one tip I have, if it's a bit hard to figure out where the start of round is you can add a stitch marker near this side to help you know when you're at the end of round, so that you can switch to the non-decrease row. So we'll decrease on this side and stop at the beginning of round marker. I finished this second side of decreases, and I'm going to turn my work again. If you'd like, you can tuck in these extra tails in the sock so they don't get in the way as much. Now pulling the needles again to readjust, and again the sequence is 1 decrease round, 1 plain knit round. So now I'm going to do a plain knit round. We are going to repeat these 2 different rounds until we get to 14 stitches left on both needles, and it's 14 for my size. I've repeated the sequence of decreasing for a round and then knitting for a round until I have 14 stitches left on both needles for my size. Now I'm only going to do decrease rounds until there are 8 stitches on both needles for a total of 16 stitches. So again, slip, slip, knit, knit 2 together, turn your work, slip, slip, knit, knit 2 together, and I'll do that 3 to 6 times depending on your size. I decreased on every row, and now I'm left with 8 stitches on both needles, and now we're going to close the toe. We're almost done with the sock. So I am going to take some red yarn here and leave a medium length tail and cut it. I'm taking a tapestry needle and just a tool here to help me weave in the yarn. And I am going to work a stitch called the Kitchener stitch to close up the sock. And it's a 4-stitch sequence. Right now I have my stitches pushed up to the edge of the needle, and I have my yarn coming from the back stitch. I am going to face the front and slip the tapestry needle purlwise through the front stitch, and I'm going to slip it off the needle and pull. And then this second stitch in the front, I'm inserting the needle purlwise through the front and keeping it on the needle. We're turning to focus on the back now. For this first stitch, I'm pushing the tapestry needle through purlwise and taking it off the needle and pulling. And then this second stitch on the back, I'm going knitwise and keeping it on the needle, and right here you'll make sure the yarn is not caught on the needle. Once those 4 stitches are done, you can give it a gentle tug and it closes everything up. And now we are going to repeat till we're at the end. I'm going through knitwise on the front, slipping it off, purlwise, keeping the stitch on, moving to the back needle, purlwise, slip it off, and knitwise, keep it on the needle. Give it a little tug. One more time On the front needle, the first stitch will take off knitwise. Second stitch, keep it on purlwise. Back needle now, first stitch off the needle purlwise. And second stitch, leave on the needle, putting it through knitwise, fixing the yarn here. I am going to repeat that until there are 2 stitches left on the needle, one on the front and one on the back. I'll do the last stitches together. First stitch knitwise, pull it off the needle. Second stitch purlwise, keep it on the needle. On the back now, first stitch purlwise, off the needle. Second stitch knitwise, keep it on the needle, fixing the yarn. But technically we are done with our needles. We're gonna slip it off. We'll have 2 little loops here and we're gonna go through them one more time to close the toe. So I'm going to insert my hand into the sock, trying to not get stuck on all of the tails. All right, I'm all the way at the end now, and I like to go through these stitches one more time and then into the toe to weave the end on the inside. So 1 stitch is right here, 1 stitch is right here, and then I'm gonna pull down, going a little bit below it and pulling the yarn through with my other hand. That will close up, and now we have a completed toe. That's the Kitchener stitch, and now we are almost done with our sock. All we have to do now is weave our ends, and I'll show you a little bit there on how to do that. All right, and now we can weave in our ends. Let's start with the red one here on the side. I've weaved the yarn on the tapestry needle, and I will try to keep the colors matching together, because if we put red facing this way, you might see it through the white yarn. So we have this little attachment here. I'm going to gently pull on these tails and go up and down the back side of the bumps, going through just a part of the stitch. And hopefully you can see I'm going up several stitches and pulling through. I want to make sure it's not stuck to the other side of the project. Pulling that yarn through, giving it a nice tug, and now we'll go the other way through the tops of those stitches right there and pull through. I like to do 3 turns or 3 lengths total. I haven't had any issues with it coming out though. Okay, and then one more time all the way through. You're done with that for now, and you can cut the yarn just a little bit higher than that stitch. And this is the inside of your work, so you will kind of see the extra yarn there, but once you're wearing the sock, you won't see this at all. And then we have the rest of our ends from our stripes and the cuff, and I had to change yarn a little bit in between. I'll show you here. If you have to change your yarn in the middle of a round, there can tend to be a little hole here. So when you weave in your ends, instead of going opposite here, I like to twist them, give them a pull, and weave them in the opposite direction. So that will close up the hole a little bit. Again, cross them and weave on this side, weave on that side. And yeah, after you weave in all the ends, trying to close up any holes, you'll be done with your sock. All right, now you're done with your sock. You've knit from the top to the bottom, weaved in the ends, and now optionally you can block the sock by soaking it in some warm water. You can add wool wash if you'd like, and laying them out flat to dry or putting them on sock blockers. Hopefully you had a fun time knitting this project. Definitely let me know if you have questions or need help. And yeah, thank you for watching and supporting me. Thank you so much for watching this video and knitting my pattern, the girlfriend socks. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Stitched by Cleo to see more of my knitting and crafting. If you'd like to share your work online, you can use the hashtag girlfriend socks or tag me. I also have a knitting podcast and I do knitting vlogs and sewing vlogs. So if you want to see more of my videos, you can subscribe. And again, thank you so much. See you later.